Chapter 1, The Blank Game. Hi, my name's Andrew Doe. I'm 18, and I've been a die-hard Kingdom Hearts fan since the day the game came out in 2001. I've played all of the installments of the game, even 358/2 days, which I found lacking compared to the rest, and have kept myself posted on every piece of news related to the series. I'm writing this both as a warning and as a testament in case anything happens to me in the near future. Let's get this over with. Well, I was on eBay and I had found a copy of the final mix edition of Kingdom Hearts, Earth I Sleep. Seeing as I only have the original version, which I've beaten 10 times over, I decided to take a look. Apparently the auctioneer was very eager to get rid of it, because the only description of the item he had given was, Please, Please. Take this from me. I was a bit worried, since he was only charging $3 for the game, adding in shipping and handling of course, and there were no bidders for the item. I should have disregarded it right then, it would have saved me SOMUCH trouble. But like an idiot, I figured it was only $3, I can spare it. I bid for the item and was approved instantly. I had sent the money via PayPal and expected the game within 3 days. It arrived on my doorstep in a small package sent by the post office. The postman was a bit suspicious of me and asked for my signature. I took the package and signed my name on the dotted line. It was only after returning to my house did I see why he was so shifty. The package had no return address. Before I opened it up, I mailed the auctioneer only to be met with no reply. I went back on eBay and found that he had deactivated his account right after the bid. This was getting more and more freaky by the minute, but I was more excited with playing my new game than I was with a shifty con man. I opened the package and saw the final mix cover of Earth I Sleep. At least he had sent the game like he promised. I opened the box and saw no manual, only the game, a memory stick, 2 gigabytes by the look of it, and a note. Curious, I took the cryptic note and read it. It said, when the darkness swallows all, be sure not to fall into its void. Keep your mind, and you'll keep your life. I had thought it was an advertisement from Square Enix for something it had planned, since it seemed typed in their font, so I just put the note away. I took the UMD out of the box to see that it was completely blank. No picture of the game's logo, no serial number, no serial credentials at all for that matter. Just AUMD. He probably removed the picture for some odd reason, probably to stare at the picture of Aqua. Perv, maybe? I'll never know. Greater than underline greater than, so I ignored it and placed the game and the included memory stick into my PSP. The moment I had turned on the PSP, it took me to its system menu. I kept automatic startup off at all times, just in case. I looked at the save data utility and opened the data contained in the memory stick. He had played through all of the stories in level 1 critical mode. A gamer that likes a challenge. A dying breed. He had a secret episode file, so he had beaten the game and unlocked the secret movie, including the secret episode in its movie. There was one other file, but there was something off. The save logo had no picture of whatever character he was playing as. Now that I think about it, it lacked the Earth I Sleep logo, too. The text showing where he was when he saved and what level he was at were all overwritten with a letter X, level, X, location, XXXXXX. Date, XX/XX/XXXX. This must have been a hack or something. I tried to delete it, but whenever I highlighted the file, I couldn't even access the options menu for some reason. Whoever this was adamant that this file stay alive. I exited out of the utility and started the game up. Glitches were around. The PSP logo never came on when the game started up. Nor did it short jingle. I got to the typical checking memory stick prompt and confirmed it. The opening cinematic to the game never came on. It had gone directly to the title screen. Oddly enough, the text was in English, something unexpected from a Final Mix game. Final mixes tend to have Japanese text, unless English text is unlockable somehow. The title screen itself lacked music and had an ominous feel to it. There were no pictures in the background at all, unlike the other KH games I've played. Just the game's logo, which was colored red and black, for some odd reason, and the options. Install data wasn't available, for when I tried to click it, a prompt came up saying that it wasn't required. I went to continue only to find that I couldn't load any of his old files. All of them gave the same message prompt whenever I clicked on one of them, mark your OWN path. I then tried to load up the hacked file. Another prompt with another cryptic message, see the void for yourself. This wasn't what I thought it was. It must have been a hack. But I paid money for this thing and I didn't want it to go to waste. I went to new game. It asked about difficulty like always. However, only one option was available. This option was totally blank, and no description followed it. I pressed it, seeing as how I couldn't do anything else. The title screen then faded in an acid-like blur. I was getting more and more nervous by the minute. Instead of an opening sequence, I was greeted with another cryptic message, though this one lacked a prompt or choice. When the valve breaks, the cradle will not only fall, it will deteriorate everything else it touches on the way down. Don't let the cradle fall, or all will be for naught. It seemed like a warning. But for what? Chapter 2, The Figure. The scary cryptic opening served to weird me out rather than scare me. But it turns out that that was just the warm-up compared to what I saw next. The character select screen, where you choose between Terra, Ventus, and Aqua in the actual game, comes up. The music normally heard in this little sequence is distorted, practically demonic, with its low pitch and treble. Instead of the typical scene, the awakening floor, where the three usually stand, is cracked into three pieces, each of the three on their own piece. The background surrounding the awakening is a purplish hue instead of the normally serene black. I then see Terra, Ventus, and Aqua, but I see the three impaled on what look like spikes of darkness jutting out from the cracks in the awakening, the spikes piercing through their bodies and coming out of their chests in a very graphic manner. From what I could see, blood was dripping from the corpses impaled on the spikes onto the pieces they were on, the blood then falling into the bottomless abyss below. My eyes opened wide in half fear, half disgust. Since when does Kingdom Hearts have blood? But another, more unnerving question, since when does Kingdom Hearts contain the sprites for blood in the first place? The option to select them comes up. Their picture logos show their eyes dripping tears of blood while their skin is pale gray. I scare real easy, so I began to breathe heavily. Whoever hacked this had a very sick mind. While trying to keep my cool, I tried to select Aqua in an effort to test for some degree of normalcy. Like I expected, a message came up, a victim of the void. I tried Terra and Ventus. Two more messages. For Terra, the builder of the cradle. For Ventus, the wind pushing the cradle. The nursery rhyme messages served only to scare me more. Nowadays, whenever somebody hears a nursery rhyme, it's usually in a horror movie. And ALWAYS signifies trouble. I moved to what appeared to be a fourth option. The scene zooms in on what appears to be a total shadow, their figure obscured from view. The shadow in question looks like it's using Terra sprite model, but their body, face, and features are all black. As if it's trying to hide itself. Think like the anti-Sora form from Kingdom Hearts 2, only no color whatsoever. I select its option, and another message comes up. The wind is blowing continuously. Can you balance the cradle? A choice came up. This must be part of the warning. With a very deep inhale, I choose yes. A light shines on the figure as an ear-deafening screech fills my ears, the scene zooming past the figure's face and into a loading screen. I don't know what that was. And this was just the beginning. At that moment, I find myself at the world map in the game. This was Act 2. The purple/pinkish backgrounds usually present were now pitch black, and I could almost swear sprites resembling eyes were put there, watching the map through the background textures. You know, where if you go to the edge of the map and are pushed back. Those textures. The music that plays is, like the awakening, low-pitched and demonic. I seem to be in control of the figure shown in the select screen. His key glider spray wasn't spared modification either. The figure seems to be riding what appears to be a bloody object. It looked like a cross to me at first, but once I moved a little, I saw what looked like wings flapping. I chose to ignore this and look around. I moved the figure to the left of the world map, where the Princess of Art worlds were. The Mirage Arena was gone, instead replaced with what was made to look like a human eye. It looked bloodshot, and it kept itself trained on the figure whenever I moved it, as if it were poised to strike or something. My breathing became worse. What did this all mean? I didn't risk going near it and moved the figure downwards. The Princess World's enchanted dominion, castle of dreams, and dwarf woodlands were all glitched, their structures, replaced with random binary data, formed into the shape of the worlds themselves. I tried going near the enchanted dominion, but the figure was pushed away the moment I had gotten close enough, as if I had touched a barrier. These worlds were disabled, obviously. I moved the figure away from this area and went to the other side of the map. Deep Space, Neverland, Disney Town, and Olympus Coliseum were glitched up in the same way, and were also inaccessible. I moved to the southern part of the map. The mysterious tower and the land of departure weren't even there. The only familiar world I saw was the Destiny Islands. I cautiously moved the figure towards the world. At that moment, a landing prompt came up. In the normal game, you can't land on the Destiny Islands. I honestly wanted to put the game down right now and just forget about all I've seen. But something inside me urged me on. Almost as if somebody else were telling me to keep playing. I chose Visit This World from the landing prompt. This time, the game just faded to a black screen like always, a loading screen popping up. I had calmed down a bit, but that comfort didn't last long. Once it loaded, I found the figure I was playing as standing by a wooden door on the island's right side, his features still hidden despite the sunshine in the world's sky. I was stunned. Since when was this world playable? As I examined the textures, them seemed off. The normal wooden textures that made the Destiny Islands look tropical seemingly bled around into the other textures of the world, giving the place a distorted look. There was no music, though I thought I heard sobbing in the distance. The figure begins to walk forward, beyond my control. I try to get him to stop, but I can't, so I sit and wait. The figure walks to the shore of the beach, just as two boys come running into the area. I soon see that they are Sora and Rikyu, their young selves just like in the original game. They were hacked, too. Their clothes were bloody, as if they had just come out of a desperate struggle. One of Rikyu's eyes were missing, an empty socket in the place of his left eye. Sora suffered from the same affliction, only with his right eye. The eyes that were working had bloody tears dripping from them, just like the pictures in the character select screen. Their flesh looked mangled, almost zombie-like. The two immediately take out wooden swords and enter battle poses, intending to engage the figure in combat. Sora says something angrily, but all I hear are static and glitch sounds, and subtitles seem disabled, so I couldn't understand him at all. At this point, I was simply speechless. I didn't know what this meant, nor did I want to know, but I had to keep playing. I had to know what it was trying to tell me, or it would haunt me forever. The scene then zoomed in on the figure's back. The figure extends his right arm as a keyblade appears in his hand. With an insane chuckle, he finally turns around to face the camera. At that moment, the black color, covering his features, started to melt off of his body, bleeding into the textures of the islands, distorting them further. I knew who it was now. It was Xehanort, in Terra's body, just like in the original game. In reality, it was Terra, just with his eyes turned yellow and his hair turned white, but I knew who this was supposed to be. The keyblade in the figure's hand turned out to be Xehanort's as well. Another dead giveaway as to the figure's identity. Another loading screen went by. Then, the scene moved to the figure's back, as an information bar showing your current objective hovered over the screen. And I couldn't believe what it said. Kill them. At this point, I practically shattered Rick. This was some freaky shit. As soon as I was in control of Xehanort, I noticed a few things. First off, the mugshot in the HP bar wasn't there, just like in the save file. Secondly, there was no dealing for shot lock gauge for Xehanort to use. There was also no music playing in the background, just sobbing that seemed to grow louder with each passing minute. Finally, I had paused the game and saw one of the most haunting images I've ever seen in my life. On the pause screen was an image of a real-life man being torn in half by an odd-looking machine, his blood spattering all over the camera that took the photo. His face was contorted in agony as the intestines that were failing out were visible in clear detail. The image was so realistic. It obviously wasn't part of the game. I literally screamed bloody murder, throwing up where I was sitting the moment I saw it. What kind of asshole would pass out filthy shit like that? In an effort to calm myself, I took in a deep breath. I had seen some stuff that was not going to be leaving my mind anytime soon. It was too late to turn back. I had to know why all of this was made. I unpaused the game to find myself playing as Xehanort again. Sora and Rikyu began to advance. I had Xehanort running up to Sora, attacking him with a normal 3-hit combo. Xehanort played just like Terra, so I knew his strengths and weaknesses. Sora could barely fight, so he was no challenge. I noticed that as I attacked Sora, the sky started changing color. Once I had depleted Sora's HP to 0, the sky was blood red. The scene zooms in for a reaction sequence. Sora tries to attack one last time, but as he jumps into the air to attack from above, Xehanort aims his hand at Sora, the game prompting me to constantly press X. I do so, to see Xehanort's hand charging up with dark energies. The prompt disappears as Xehanort releases a spike of darkness that stabs through Sora's chest and out of his other side. The scene zooms in on Sora's face as he says, "The vow is breaking, Andrew. Are you strong enough?" I was sweating now. How did Sora know my name? How did the hacker know my name? At that moment, Sora's body explodes into a shower of red as his blood and entrails fall onto the sand. Xehanort turns to engage Rikyu. Rikyu stops short and exits out of combat stance. He looks at Xehanort with what seemed to be pity. Then he turns and looks at me directly. "The cradle will fall and deteriorate everything," Rikyu says to me. "All you know will cease to exist, and so will you." My hands were literally shaking now. I was starting to get the feeling that this was no hack at all. It was something worse. But don't worry, Rikyu says as he turns his wooden sword upon himself, preparing to stab. Rikyu does so as the sword runs in through, blood gushing from his body as he falls to his knees. You'll get a glimpse of the void before you fall. With a death moan, Rikyu finally lands on the sands of Destiny Islands lifelessly. Chapter 3, The Fallen Cradle. My legs were spasming. My eyes were wide. Sweat was falling from every single pore in my body. I vomited again. I could not believe what I was seeing. Rikyu just committed suicide and addressed me directly. Me, not Xehanort, me. I was put in control of Xehanort again as he responded to my movement commands this time. All I could really do was take in what the hell just happened. Now I know. This is no hack. I used the camera controls to look around. Sora's blood and guts from earlier were still there, reacting whenever Xehanort stepped towards them. Rikyu's corpse just lay there on the sand as blood flowed from the wound made by the wooden sword stuck inside and into the water by the shore. Oddly enough, it felt as though he was looking at Xehanort the whole time, but I chalked it up to how he fell. Things started up again. The blood that entered the water tainted it, as red coloring started taking the place of the vast ocean slowly. I decided not to stick around to see what else happened and moved Xehanort towards the dock, where Selphie usually sits in the original Kingdom Hearts. The wood holding the walkway together was broken, as the structure bent down like a pair of stairs. At the end of the world, from the original KH game, I moved Xehanort further, down the mainland, near the treehouse area. This was shocking. Throughout the whole area, I saw what appeared to be intestines or some sort of organic material strewn across the rock face and all across the wooden docks that must survive whatever happened here. I ignore it, for the sake of my sanity, moving closer to the secret place. As Xehanort advances to the secret place, the screen begins to crackle with static for each step he takes. By the time he's directly near the cave entrance, the whole screen becomes staticky, finally becoming nothing but static, entering another loading screen, the static remaining throughout. The static finally begins to subside as I see him standing by the exit to the cave, parallel from the door. But I immediately freaked out. Instead of the usually rock sketches and rock textures one would expect, the rock face was replaced with organic muscle-looking matter. It was most likely just red color modification, while the sketches, such as the one of Sora and Terry for example, were replaced by real-life photos similar to the one I saw on the pause menu, lowered in size and apparently just pasted onto the texture itself. All of the photos shown were of people being killed and taken apart in gruesome and grotesque ways, many of the depictions involving dismemberment. One depicted a little child, at least 7 years of age, whose upper body skin was removed in the shape of a t-shirt as he is seen staring at the camera, filled with sorrow. The skin was discarded right near him, implying that the cameraman was the perpetrator. I almost dropped the PSP in my hands when I saw it. The other photos were even worse, so gruesome that I dare not describe them lest I vomit again. I had Xehanort running up to the door, only for the door to begin to move away from him. Must be intended, because the longer I spent running towards the door, the more it moved away. I tried running back towards the exit, only it to not be there at all. It was a one-way road. After a time of running towards the door fruitlessly, a healing gauge finally appeared by Xehanort's HP gauge. Now I'm worried. So far, something in this game happens, for a reason. Despite the trembling of my fingers, I cautiously pressed the right directional stick as the healing list came up. There was only one option. 0 10 10 1 0 0 0 1 1 0 1 0 0 0 0 1 1 0 0 1 0 1 0 0 1 0 0 0 0 0 0 1 0 0 0 0 1 1 0 1 1 1 0 0 1 0 0 1 1 0 0 0 0 1 0 1 1 0 0 1 0 0 0 1 1 0 1 1 0 0 0 1 1 0 0 1 0 1. I knew only one thing, it was a word written in binary code. What it meant, however, I had no clue. With a shuddering sigh, I pressed the X button. At that moment, a voice echoes from an unknown area as everything around Xehanort grows dark. When the wind blows, the cradle will fall. The floor disappears underneath Xehanort as he begins to fall, another loading screen starting up. Throughout the loading process, Xehanort is seen falling into an endless abyss. Another voice, this one sounding like Riku's. Down will come baby, cradle and all. After that verse of the nursery rhyme, I start to hear agonized screaming of random origin and random pitches echoing in the background of wherever Xehanort was. I started getting nervous again. How worse could this get? Stupid question. The loading symbol disappears after 1 minute of silence as Xehanort finally lands. I gain control of him right away as I scan my surroundings. This was the awakening. Jutting from the platform I was on is seen a walkway. The walkway was made up of more pasted in decapitation photographs, arranged in the shape of a curving path downwards. This spelled trouble in capital letters. Whatever this game was trying to tell me wasn't in a hurry. In fact, it was almost goading me to seek the answer out on my own. But I had come this far, endured too much shit, saw too much horror, not to know the answer. The answer. I moved Xehanort closer onto the photograph road, deciding against using the camera to examine them. I have enough stuff in my mind for years to come. Once he reaches the first tile and begins walking across, I hear screaming in the background. I stop, and then take another step. Another scream, this one of a higher intensity. Breathing hard, but persistently, I have Xehanort run at full speed, down the path. The screams practically bleed my ears out, but eventually I make it across the path and onto the awakening from the character select screen. There they were. Terra, Ventus, and Aqua, still impaled on the spikes from before. It looks as though the blood on the pieces has dried. I use the camera controls to find myself standing on Terra's piece of the awakening. I turn Xehanort around to see that the photograph pathway has disappeared. I was stranded. And that's when I heard the sounds. Oh, God, the sounds. I hear squishing and moving as I see that the corpses, attached to the spikes, begin to writhe around in place. I use the camera controls to look around in first-person view. Ventus was simply moving around in place, while Aqua's head was spinning in place over and over, exorcist style. The worst one yet was Terra. I see Terra's body place its hands around the spike, stabbing it and proceeding to climb, or should I say scoot or shamble, up the spike near to the tip. Once it got off of the tip, it fell to the ground right next to Xehanort. With a grunt of effort, the body raises itself and stands upright. Xehanort jumps backwards beyond my control, the camera beginning to focus on Terra cutscene style. The time has come, Andrew. Terra says. I hear more squishing sounds as Aqua and Ventus finally find their way off of their spikes and are now facing Xehanort. This was it. Whatever the reason, I'm playing this was right here, in front of my eyes. What was eerie was that it was only their bodies contorted. Aqua was missing an ear, and one of Ventus's eyes were missing. Aside from that, everything else about them was perfectly normal. Especially Terra. Aside from a stomach wound, he didn't have a scratch on him. It was almost as if nothing had ever happened to them. Maybe this was a symbol? The camera focuses on Aqua and Ventus, looking at me through the camera. When the wind blows, Ventus says, the cradle will fall. Aqua says, the camera switches to Terra. And down will come Andrew, cradle and all. Terra says, finally, I get pissed and yell my head off. I was desperate, scared, and concerned. What's the cradle? What's the wind? What the hell are you GUIS? I yell. I know they won't respond. It's just a game. But I couldn't hold it in any longer. WHYAMIPLAYINGTHIS? Aqua and Ventus look at each other and then back at me. They both summon their keyblades. The camera switches to Terra, who also summons his keyblade. I'm scared now. It felt as though they were about to come out of the PSP and hack me to bits. The camera switches to Xehanort, who summons his own keyblade in response. A brief loading screen processes as another dark photograph briefly flickers on screen. It was too fast for me to see, but it looked familiar to me for some reason. The tune to the nursery rhyme, Cradle, begins to play in the background. The screen ends as another information bar hovers over the screen, with a message similar to the one that was written on the enclosed note. Maintain the cradle, see the void. Terra immediately rushes towards Xehanort as I gain control of him. I have Xehanort guard against Terra's attack and use counter hammer. Terra's counter command, in the original game, the attack, does a lot of damage to both Terra's HP and his body. The force of the hammer pushes one of his arms off, as it falls into the void below. Terra continues his attacks as I proceeded to repeat the counter hammer strategy over and over until his HP was at its final gauge. Xehanort guards another attack, while I get a glimpse at my enemy. His body was practically destroyed at this point. Terra's ears are gone, as well as his left arm. His flesh was mangled while his armor cracked. The stomach wound that he had when I got to this place was expanded beyond repair, and his right eye was gone. It was like something out of an autopsy photo. I resisted the urge to vomit as I used one of the commands Xehanort had in his command deck, Dark Haze. Xehanort cloaks himself in darkness and rushes at Terra, running him, well, what's left of him, through with a keyblade. At this point, the scene zooms in on Xehanort and Terra as I receive a prompt to press X repeatedly. I do so, as it switches to a reaction sequence. Xehanort pulls his sword out of Terra's body as Terra tries to grab his keyblade. Xehanort then knocks Terra against the head with a guard of his weapon as Terra finally falls to his knees, spent. Xehanort then lifts his keyblade into the air, and with an insane chuckle that sounded suspiciously like a man from real life, swung his weapon. Terra's head graphically comes off at the seams as it rolls off of the platform the two are on and falls into the abyss. The area where the head once stood began to explode with blood and small parts as the entire body slumps to the ground lifelessly. Xehanort chuckles again, giving the body a push with his right boot. The body rolls off of the platform and into the chasm to join the head that adorned it. This was becoming really offensive. Kingdom Hearts was not some bloody samurai action flick. It was a children's game. I regained control of Xehanort as Ventus jumps from his piece of the awakening and engages Xehanort right away. The counter hammer strategy wouldn't work with Ventus, he was way too fast. The only to do is beat fire with fire. I used another one of the commands, Ars Solemn, to attack Ventus after I had guarded a few of his attacks. Xehanort assaulted Ventus with slash after slash of his keyblade as I saw how damaging they were. Ven's HP gauge had been reduced to its final gauge already. But that wasn't the half of it. His body was entirely mutilated by the attack Xehanort had used. Slash marks adorned his body while I see his remaining eye is hanging out of its socket. The stomach wound he had when I had reached this place was expanded and eaten through so much that his spine was now visible to the naked eye. His arms were just bone now. All of TH tissue and flesh had been shaven off during Xehanort's slash frenzy. The blood from the muscles flooded the platform the two were on as Ventus advances on Xehanort again. I was desperate to end this nightmare as fast as I could, so I used Dark Haze again after I had dodged some of his attacks. The attack ran Ventus through as another prompt came up, another reaction sequence starting. Xehanort removed his weapon from Ventus's body as he jumps into the air, slamming his keyblade into the platform. Sharp masses of rock pierce Ventus's body as one of them pokes through his arm, the arm falling out of the platform. The rest of the body falls and gets itself caught in another rock form. The tip of the rock finds itself established through the stomach wound, so it does little damage. Ventus tries to struggle free, but cannot, since his spine is serving as support for the form. The game prompts me to press X again as I do so. After I succeed, I immediately wish I hadn't. Xehanort raises his left hand, covered in darkness, as the rocks bend themselves to his will, the main one going further through Ven's stomach wound. Xehanort then arranges and moves his hands, causing the rock forms to twist and mutate themselves as the rest of them pierce various parts of Ven's body. A clap of Xehanort's hands finally stops them, while Xehanort keeps his hands clamped together. Ventus screams in agony, his voice distorted for some odd reason. The nursery tune in the background plays faster as Xehanort finally spreads his arms into the air. The rock form explodes in a shower of light as Ven's body is ripped apart by the pressure. Parts and blood drip down into the chasm below as Xehanort picks up something resembling green matter, tossing it downwards. I regain control of Xehanort as Aqua jumps onto the platform. She enters combat stance and begins walking around the platform piece cautiously waiting for me to make a move. She's a mage, so long-distance attacks aren't a good idea. I use R Solemn as my first move. Aqua manages to dodge the attack completely as she launches shards of ice at Xehanort. I manage to dodge all of the shards but one, and then I feel it. A sharp pain in my mind just when the shard connected. I was worried for my life. But I just HAD to keep on going. I have Xehanort attack with a 3-hit combo, interrupting a possible thunder spell from Aqua. At that moment, I seize my chance and use R Solemn. The attack, like with the others, does major damage, sending Aqua's HP plummeting to its final gauge. I try to use Dark Haze to follow up, but she predicts this and cartwheels out of the way, the attack failing. She then sends a fireball at Xehanort, which I manage to send flying back at her. It connects, flames covering her body, while she grabs her head and begins screaming in agony, her voice distorted as well. I seize the chance, and finally attack her with a 3-hit combo. Her HP dies down, as I receive another X prompt, and another reaction sequence. Xehanort puts his hands directly through the flames and picks Aqua in a bear hug. He presses on her body hard as I hear a loud crunching sound. I know what had happened. He's broken her spine. Next he lifts her up into the air with both hands and starts to pull on her body from both sides. A final scream from Aqua is heard as her body is finally ripped into two symmetrical halves. After waiting for the blood and gore to fall from the halves, Xehanort laughs and throws the two halves into the pit. The camera then enters cutscene mode while I myself take the time to vomit all over the floor. Xehanort begins to cackle madly, his voice different. He sounded like a man in his mid-30s, the audio directly ripped or recorded from whoever made this. At that moment, more gruesome real-life decapitation photos flood the screen in rapid precision. I begin breathing heavily again as I wait for them to pass. A man hooked to a machine, having his jawbone ripped in half by opening his mouth way too wide. A woman tied to a conveyor belt, a meat grinder in front of her. A man, strapped to an electric chair, on fire from the electricity, out of the Green Mile. A little boy having his intestines pulled out of his stomach as his eyes are kept open by clamps, forcing him to watch. Another's way too horrific to describe on this account. Finally the photos pass. As Xander begins to walk towards the edge of the platform piece he was on, I have a good feeling that I know what he's going to do. He takes his keyblade and turns it on himself, just like Ryu had done earlier. He stabs himself with a keyblade as it stays in his body. He then turns to look at me through the camera. The bow has broken, Andrew. Xander says in his normal voice. Down will come Andrew. Cradle and all. The hairs on my neck stood on end as Xander finally falls off of the platform, giving himself over to the abyss he had discarded the others in. Another gruesome photo plasters itself onto the screen as the tune in the background continues to play. It depicted the remains of a boy's body that had been shattered due to a long fall. The brain matter and blood were spread out along what looked like grass. That's when I see it. Across from the body was the broken remains of a baby's cradle. The photo then disappears as another one takes its place. It's the same picture, but shot from a different angle. A tree branch is visible, and next to the branch was the body's face. It's my face! With a loud scream, I throw my PSP across the room as it hits the wall with a WHAM. The parts for the console fly around and land in separate areas, while the screen lands nearby. I notice that despite the impact, it's the only thing that was completely intact. And it looked like there was still something on the screen. My curiosity gets the better of me as I get up and wade through my own vomit, finally ending up next to the screen. It was still on. And I saw. Asterisk the note ends here. 2 days after the incident, local police agencies found the remains of the body of Andrew Doe by a tree outside of his house. An autopsy revealed that the cause of death had been due to an impact that crushed all of his internal organs. Since there were no witnesses and no evidence to support the possibility of murder, the case was deemed a suicide and closed indefinitely. 2 years prior to the incident, a 30-year-old man was arrested for killing his 18-year-old son by tying him to the insides of a wooden cradle and pushing him off of the roof of their home. The child had died upon impact with the ground. The father was given the death penalty. The mother of the child disappeared and was never found. In 2006, Sega was planning on releasing their first console since the Dreamcast. The console was similar to the current Nintendo Wii, except that the controller looked a bit more like a Dreamcast controller. The 7th generation console was called Sega Legacy. The first and only game ever worked on for the Legacy was a new game to go along with a console called Sonic Legacy. It was pretty much the original Sonic the Hedgehog, except the graphics were in 3D and there was first-person view enabled. Sounds like a cool console, huh? Everything was going better than expected. Before they announced it as finished, Sega gave the Sega Legacy to 5 employees who had kids. They wanted the kids to test out the console and see how they liked it. 2 of the families refused, but the other 3 were more than happy to test it out. Sega even promised to give them a free console afterwards. 2 days later, one of the employees, names will not be given, 8-year-old son, was playing Sonic Legacy. After he had gone to bed at 10 p.m., he woke up at random and turned on the Legacy. A few minutes later, he walked into his parents' room. His eyes were widened and he had an eerie smile. "What is it, son?" asked the father. The boy stood there with a big grin on his face. "I'm Robotnik," he said in a raspy voice. The voice was distorted and muffled. Suddenly, the lights went out. The power was out all night long. In the morning, the mother went to wake their son for school. He wasn't there. Nobody ever found him. Similar occurrences happened to the other families. Sega was alarmed and visited each of the families. The families returned the consoles. The Sega employees and programmers decided to play Sonic Legacy to see if it had anything to do with anything. The cheerful title screen ran. Since the programmers created the game, they easily went through the game. However, during the final boss battle with Robotnik, something odd happened. The audio began to sound distorted. Suddenly the game paused. Sonic began to smile. It went to a cutscene. The programmers and employees stared at each other in shock. The big shock was that no Sonic game had ever contained a cutscene in the middle of the final boss. A cartoon Sonic sat down on a rock. He was looking at something glowing. The glowing stopped. It then cut to the body of Robotnik. The eyes were torn out, some hair was pulled out, he was bleeding from wrinkles, and his nose was jerked to the right. Sonic began to cut open the body and he put the body over his body. Sonic now looked like Robotnik. It then showed another Sonic running around. The Sonic, dressed up as Robotnik, gave an evil smile. The programmers and employees shook in terror. The fact that Sonic defeats his enemy, becomes Robotnik, and gets killed by another Sonic, boggled their minds. It was a terrifying chain of suicide. All events after the cutscene finished are unknown. All that is known is that there was another cutscene afterwards. From the other room, people claimed to hear a man speaking in Russian in a distorted voice. When they came back in the room, they found everybody lying there dead, with their eyes ripped out. However, 2 of the employees survived. One is blind and is confined in a wheelchair for life. He refuses to speak to anyone besides his family and close friends. The other employee is able to see, but he has never spoken about his experience. He is unable to be outside without someone with him, and is said to have recurring nightmares. All copies of the Sonic Legacy game were said to be destroyed. This led to the cancellation of the Sega Legacy console. In 2009, an avid video game bootlegger found a Sega Legacy. The eerie part is that he was able to play Sonic Legacy on the console without the CD. A few days later, he was found dead in his closet, where he had hung himself. So this is just a warning to all people curious. Don't try to find the Sega Legacy unless you're either willing to risk your life or suffer from recurring nightmares and demons.